A little girl in a red cloak skipping through the woods to visit grandmother, sweet, innocent, harmless. But this beloved bedtime story wasn't born from imagination. It emerged from something far more sinister. Real disappearances, real predators, and real terror that stalked medieval villages. The tale you know is sanitized, sterilized. The original versions weren't meant for children's ears. They whispered of violence and ritualistic terror. In some early tellings, there was no heroic huntsman, no rescue, just darkness. Here's what they don't want you to know. Historians have traced Little Red Riding Hood to actual events: missing children, wolves that walked on two legs, and a pattern of disappearances that plagued European forests for centuries. The red cloak, it wasn't just a fashion choice. In medieval times, red was the color of sacrifice, of marking the innocent for butchery. That grandmother's house, deep in the woods, archaeological evidence suggests ritual sites where unspeakable acts took place. The wolf is not simply a metaphor. In the 16th century France, a creature terrorized the countryside, specifically targeting young girls. The beast of Gévaudan did away with over 100 people before vanishing without explanation. Tonight, we're peeling back the fairy tale facade to reveal the horrible truth beneath, because sometimes the monsters in our stories aren't fiction. They're memories we've tried desperately to forget. Glad to have you join us again on Buried Tales, where the true darkness behind old stories is exposed. When it comes to the story itself, the Brothers Grimm didn't create Little Red Riding Hood, they sanitized it. The original tale, written in 1697 by Charles Perrault for adult audiences, tells a very different story. One that reveals the predatory nature lurking beneath civilized society. In Perrault's version, Little Red Riding Hood is described as the most stunning creature ever seen. When she enters her grandmother's cottage, the wolf doesn't simply threaten her, he invites her into bed. And to his delight, she complies, removing every piece of clothing before slipping beneath the covers with him. The familiar exchange follows, but this time, when Little Red Riding Hood exclaims about the wolf's big teeth, his response chills the soul. All the better to eat you up with. And that's exactly what happens. No woodsman arrives, no heroic rescue. The wolf devours her, and the story ends. Perrault concludes with a warning that cuts like a blade. Attractive young ladies should never speak to strangers, because if they do, they might just become dinner for a wolf. But then he delivers the real punch, the words that expose his true meaning. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home and in the streets. Unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. This wasn't a children's story about stranger danger. This was a brutal warning about predators disguised as gentlemen, written for the court of King Louis XIV, where young women from wealthy families were constantly hunted by ambitious men seeking to climb the social ladder through advantageous marriages. But even Perrault's disturbing tale pales compared to its source material. Deep in European folklore lies the false grandmother, a folktale included in Italian folktales, a collection retold and adapted by Italo Calvino in 1956. This story is intensely dark. It makes your skin crawl. Here, our heroine doesn't meet a wolf at all, but a werewolf at a crossroads. The creature asks whether she'll take the path of needles or pins. She chooses needles. He takes pins and arrives first at grandmother's house. What happens next is pure horror. The werewolf doesn't just claim the grandmother, he butchers her, placing her in the pantry and her lifeblood in a bottle. When the girl arrives, he serves her this ghastly meal. As she eats, the grandmother's cat speaks. Shameful is she who eats the flesh and drinks of her grandmother. The werewolf then commands her to undress and join him in bed. One by one, she removes each piece of clothing, apron, bodice, dress, skirt, stockings, asking what to do with each item. His answer is always the same. Throw it in the fire, my child. You won't be needing it anymore. The flames consume everything. She's left defenseless, at the mercy of this creature. But here's what's truly unsettling. Some scholars believe she knew exactly what she was doing. Think about it. Who strips to climb into bed with their grandmother? The gradual removal of clothing reads like a striptease. The verbal exchanges like flirtatious taunting. This tale emerged during the height of witch trials and werewolf hysteria in the 15th and 16th centuries. The talking cat wasn't just a magical element. Cats were believed to be witches in disguise, or the devil himself. The consumption of flesh mirrors the Christian Eucharist, but twisted into a ritual, a black mass. The werewolf meeting her at crossroads carries its own sinister meaning. In folklore, crossroads are where demons are summoned, where deals with the devil are struck. Witches were believed to engage in unions with demons to gain their powers. Perhaps that's exactly what's happening in this ancient tale. While we remember the witch trials, we've forgotten the werewolf trials that ran parallel. The same hysteria, the same fear, the same brutal executions. These real-world terrors bled into folklore, creating stories that weren't meant to entertain children, but to warn adults about the monsters hiding in plain sight. And that red cloak Perrault added. Red symbolized sin, sensuality, maturity. The transition from innocence to experience, it marked her as a target, a woman entering the dangerous world where wolves dressed as gentlemen prowl, waiting for their next victim. The year 1598 brought forth one of history's most disturbing werewolf cases, a tale so grotesque it would echo through European folklore for centuries. Peter Stump, known as the Werewolf of Bedburg, wasn't some wild hermit living on society's fringes. He was a respected farmer, a widower raising 2 children, a man his neighbors trusted completely. But beneath that carefully crafted facade lurked something unspeakably evil. According to Stump's own chilling confession, his transformation began at just 12 years old, when he first experimented with forbidden occult practices. This childhood dabbling eventually led to what he claimed was a direct encounter with Satan himself. The devil, Stump confessed, gifted him a magical belt that granted him the power to become something monstrous, a massive wolf with burning eyes that glowed like fire in the darkness, armed with razor-sharp teeth and claws capable of tearing human flesh from bone. For years, Stump used this supernatural ability to hunt the most vulnerable members of his community. His victims included 14 children, one his own son, and 2 pregnant women. He would stalk young maidens through the forests, assaulting them before ending their lives. Many of these victims simply vanished without a trace, their families left to wonder what darkness had swallowed their loved ones whole. But Stump's appetite wasn't limited to human prey. Witnesses reported finding livestock, deer, sheep, and goats torn apart with an almost supernatural violence, their flesh devoured in ways that defied natural explanation. When authorities finally captured Stump, the truth that emerged was even more horrifying than the community could have imagined. The charges against Stump read like a catalogue of humanity's darkest sins: sorcery, black magic, devil worship, and consorting with demons. His execution on October 31st, 1589, remains one of history's most brutal, too overwhelming to describe. It remains a grotesque monument to evil that would haunt the town for years. But here's what makes this case truly unsettling. Stump only confessed under extreme duress. How much of his story was real, and how much was the desperate fabrication of a man being torn apart? The suspicion against him began when a villager claimed to see a wolf with a missing paw fleeing a crime scene, a detail that matched Stump's own disability from a previous injury. Was this coincidence enough to condemn a man to such a horrific end? The Stump case spread across Europe through printed pamphlets, fueling a continent-wide hysteria about werewolves lurking in every forest. And perhaps most chilling of all, some scholars believe this very case inspired one of our most beloved fairy tales. The themes are unmistakable. A wolf who preys on innocent victims, particularly young girls, using deception to get close before revealing his true, monstrous nature. Could Peter Stump, the werewolf of Bedburg, have evolved into the big bad wolf that has terrified children for centuries? The parallels are too striking to ignore, suggesting that sometimes our darkest fairy tales aren't fiction at all. They're warnings passed down through generations, reminders of the very real monsters that once walked among us. But there's something darker lurking beneath these fairy tale wolves, something rooted in centuries of genuine terror that modern audiences can barely comprehend. For generations across Europe, Wolves weren't just forest creatures to be respected or feared. They were man-eaters. Bounties were placed on their heads in relentless extermination campaigns that painted them as demons with fangs. Today, we see wolves as shy, almost timid creatures that avoid human contact at all costs. But this raises a chilling question. If wolves are so harmless, why do historical records overflow with accounts of brutal wolf attacks? The answer lies in one of history's most devastating climate disasters, the Little Ice Age. From the 15th to the 19th centuries, Europe was gripped by winters so severe that the Bosporus in Turkey froze solid for months. Rivers turned to ice highways, and entire cities disappeared under blankets of snow. In these unforgiving conditions, wolves faced a terrifying choice: starve in the frozen forests or venture into human territory for survival. Winter, 1450. Paris, the city lay wounded and exposed, its protective walls crumbling from the devastation of the 100 Years' War. As temperatures plummeted and snow buried the streets, something sinister emerged from the darkness. A pack of ravenous wolves, led by a massive beast with a fiery red coat and a distinctive stubbed tail. The Parisians called him Chateau, Bobtail. At first, these wolves scavenged from shallow graves and preyed on the homeless who had frozen in doorways. But human flesh awakened something primal in them. Soon, they were hunting living prey, prowling the streets in coordinated packs, dragging women and children from their homes in broad daylight. The numbers are staggering, 40 in the first month alone, then hundreds more as the pack grew bolder, their ranks swelling with each successful hunt. Night after night, the howls echoed through the cobblestone streets, a soundtrack of impending doom that drove the city to the brink of madness. But desperation breeds ingenuity. A group of brave Parisians devised a plan that sounds like something from a horror film. They dragged a butchered cow through the streets, creating a trail that led straight to the heart of the city. Chateau and his pack followed, lured by the scent into the ultimate trap. Under the shadow of Notre Dame, the citizens of Paris made their final stand. Armed with stones and spears, they surrounded the wolves in a climactic battle that would decide the fate of their city. When the dust settled, every wolf lay dead. Chateau's lifeless body was paraded through the streets like a conquered demon. Now, some historians question these accounts, suggesting the death tolls were inflated by mass hysteria. But modern science offers a more disturbing explanation for these medieval wolf attacks: rabies. This disease transforms any animal into a frenzied maniac, driving them to attack anything that moves with relentless aggression. Today, we've virtually eliminated rabies in developed nations through vaccination programs, which explains why wolf attacks are almost unheard of. But in medieval times, a rabid wolf was an unstoppable nightmare, a creature that seemed possessed by supernatural evil. This connection becomes even more chilling when you consider that werewolf legends likely emerged as humanity's attempt to explain rabies before they understood the disease. When people witnessed neighbors foaming at the mouth and attacking others with animal-like fury after being bitten by wolves, supernatural transformation seemed like the only logical explanation. But here's where things get unsettling. Little Red Riding Hood didn't emerge from thin air. Its roots stretch back through centuries of darker, more disturbing tales that reveal humanity's oldest fears. The famous dialogue, "Oh grandmother, what big hands you have," echoes a chilling scene from the 13th century Norse Edda. In this ancient story, the trickster god Loki must explain why his bride, Freya, is acting so strangely. What the giant Thrym doesn't know is that beneath the wedding veil lurks Thor in disguise, ready to strike. When Thrym questions why Freya devours an entire ox, 8 salmon, and 3 casks of mead, Loki smoothly lies that she hasn't eaten for 8 days out of longing. When the giant notices her terrifying eyes, Loki claims she hasn't slept for 8 nights, burning with desire to see him. Just like the wolf's clever deceptions, these lies lead directly to the victim's destruction. Even more haunting is an 11th century tale written by a priest. A young girl in a red wool tunic, a gift from her godfather, wanders into the woods and meets a wolf. But this wolf, touched by her innocence, spares her life. Divine intervention tames the beast, or so the story claims. But perhaps the most disturbing connection comes from ancient Greece. Legend tells of a man who violated a local maiden and was stoned to death by his outraged community. Death, however, wasn't his end, it was his transformation. He returned as a vengeful demon wrapped in wolf skin, stalking through villages and slaughtering innocent people, one by one. Terror gripped the survivors. To appease this monster's insatiable hunger, they built a temple in his honor. Each year, they chose their most beautiful young woman and sacrificed her to the beast, hoping to buy another year of peace. This cycle of horror continued until Euthymus, an Olympic boxing champion, ambushed the demon in brutal combat. He drove the creature into the sea, finally breaking the curse. Whether these ancient nightmares directly shaped Little Red Riding Hood remains a mystery, but the patterns are impossible to ignore. Innocent girls, predatory wolves, and the thin line between civilization and savage hunger. As we emerge from the labyrinth of folklore and history, Little Red Riding Hood stands as something far more unsettling than a simple children's tale. Its enduring appeal lies not just in its blend of innocence and darkness, but in how it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about trust, predation, and the thin line between safety and danger that exists in every human interaction. Each version of this story, from Perrault's stark warning to the Brothers Grimm's rescued heroine, reveals the fears and values of its time. Yet beneath these cultural layers lies something universal, the recognition that the world contains those who would exploit innocence, and that survival often depends on learning to recognize the wolf behind the familiar face. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the twisted roots of a beloved tale. If you found yourself drawn into this exploration, don't forget to leave a like. It helps more people discover these buried stories. Subscribe to become part of our growing community of buried tale seekers who aren't afraid to look beneath the surface of the stories we thought we knew. What surprised you most about Little Red Riding Hood's dark origins? And more importantly, what other childhood tales do you suspect might be hiding darker truths beneath their innocent facades? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment and often find inspiration for future investigations. Until we meet again to uncover another buried secret, remember that the most innocent stories often conceal the most disturbing truths, and those truths, no matter how deeply we try to forget them, are always buried.